Most people in Wilmont didn't dislike Eli Whitaker. They just didn't notice him. The sun had barely crested over the eastern ridge, and the town of Wilmont stirred slowly to life like an old man stretching before getting out of bed. Porch flags snapped in the breeze, crisp red, white, and blue rectangles flaring against a cornflower sky. Memorial Day was around the corner, and nearly every home on Main Street had a flag up, even if only because everyone else did. Eli's garage sat on the edge of town, just beyond where the sidewalk gave up and gravel took over. It was a square building with peeling white paint and a faded green sign that once read Whitaker Auto Service, though now it mostly just read Kier Auto. Next to it, Eli's trailer sat low and silent, a rust-edged structure half swallowed by weeds. He kept it neat, though, just as he did everything. At 6:03 a.m., Eli flipped the switch on the old radio mounted above his tool rack. Gospel hummed through static, and he adjusted the knob until the voices of 4 part-time preachers in harmony drifted through, soft and steady. He poured himself a cup of black coffee from a thermos he refilled every night and took his usual seat on the crate beside the front bay. The morning was humid, the kind of warmth that clung to the skin and promised storms later. Eli took a sip, listening more to the silence between the music than the melody itself. They said he used to be something else, someone else, but nobody asked, and Eli never offered. In Wilmont, questions were a kind of currency, and Eli lived on the barter system. At 6:21, the familiar rattle of an old Oldsmobile crawled down the street and turned into the lot. It coughed once before settling with a low groan. Behind the wheel, Mrs. Edna May waved a short hand, her silver curls peeking from beneath a crocheted cap. Eli set down his cup and approached with a steady gait. "Mornin', Edna," he said, his voice low but kind. "Still running, barely," she replied, handing over her key and a small foil-wrapped parcel. "Cherry this time. I was out of apples." He nodded and took both without comment. She knew he'd place the pie in the fridge and likely eat it 3 days from now when the mood struck. While he checked the engine, she sat in the shade of the garage overhang and started reminiscing out loud, as she always did. Today it was about a boy named Freddie who once brought her a frog in 2nd grade and cried when she made him let it go. Eli listened with half an ear, nodding occasionally, the pie already forgotten. His hands moved in rhythm, checking the fan belt, touching the radiator like it was a familiar shoulder. At the diner across the street, Marla wiped down the counter with circular strokes, watching through the window. "That man's been here 20 years and still orders the same thing. Black coffee, 2 eggs, never talks," she told her only customer at the moment, an insurance rep named Dan, passing through from Omaha. "Never seen him laugh. Probably doesn't even vote." Dan shrugged, more interested in his newspaper. Marla lowered her voice anyway. "Some folks say he was fire rescue back in the day. Something bad happened. He don't like crowds since." At 7:10, Sheriff Boone's cruiser rolled up slow near the war memorial beside the diner. Eli was there, kneeling beside the tilted pole that held a flag faded by sun and torn by wind. With quiet precision, he adjusted the clasp, smoothed the rope, and stood back as the stars and stripes climbed the metal line. Boone didn't say anything right away. She just leaned against the door of her cruiser, arms crossed. "You replace that every year," she finally said. "Some things ought to stay upright," Eli replied. She gave him a long look but didn't push. She'd known him since she was 15, back when he used to teach first aid at the vocational school. He was different now. Not worse, just more hollow. Downtown, 2 older men played checkers in the park beside the hardware store, shuffling pieces and talking about nothing. "That Whitaker boy," one of them muttered, "used to be fire rescue, I think. Tulsa, maybe. Never seen him at church. Or at the bar." "Still waters," the first said, nodding sagely. Still waters. The wind picked up around 8:30, sudden and sharp. A gust swirled through Main Street, tugging at tablecloths outside the diner and snatching napkins into the air. Flags cracked loudly, and a loose banner advertising the Memorial Day bake sale flapped until one corner broke free. Across the street, the old flagpole near the diner steps creaked. Edna had just exited the garage, holding a receipt in one hand and squinting into the sun. She didn't see it coming. The pole rocked once, then tilted, a metal groan splitting the moment in half. Eli was already moving. He crossed the gravel and the narrow road in 3 strides, catching the pole with both hands just before it could crash down onto the pavement, right where Edna stood. It jostled in his grip, scratched his forearm, but he held it, anchoring the base against his shoulder until the wind passed and balance returned. Edna turned, startled, the paper fluttering from her hand. When she saw what had nearly happened, she blinked. "Goodness," she whispered. Eli adjusted the pole back into its bracket, nodded once, and walked away without a word. That afternoon, after the last car had left the lot and the town returned to its usual slow breathing, Eli sat alone in the back of his garage. The light came in through warped blinds, carving soft lines across the workbench. He reached beneath a pile of rags and pulled out a small, dust-covered frame. The glass was cracked in the corner, the photo beneath slightly faded. A man stood in firefighter gear, face younger but unmistakable, serious, strong, proud. Eli looked at it for a moment. Then he wiped the glass clean with the hem of his shirt and quietly turned it face down. Eli knew the storm was serious long before the town sirens did. He could feel it in his knees. The air that afternoon pressed against the skin like wet cloth. It wasn't just heat. It was a kind of warning. Birds had vanished, crickets had gone quiet, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The sky wasn't dark, not yet, but it had turned the sickly shade of metal just before it rusts. Eli leaned against the hood of his truck, sipping water from a jug he kept in the cab. Sweat clung to his back, turning his shirt translucent in places. He watched the clouds pile up over the northern fields, felt the dry pulse behind his eyes. The gospel station on the radio cut out with a soft pop, followed by silence. Then a voice came through, sharp and mechanical. "Severe system tracking across Gage and Clay counties. Residents advised to monitor updates. Rotation spotted." He didn't need the warning. His bones told him first. His father used to say, "Don't wait for help. Be it." Eli didn't remember much from those years. His father had been a quiet man, like him, but that line had stuck. He was halfway through tightening a bolt on a tiller when he heard it, a sound out of place. Not thunder, not wind, a cry. Faint, desperate, carried by nothing but air. He stood, listening. There it was again, a child's voice, far off, thin. Without a word, he grabbed his keys, a crowbar, and the bottle of water. The truck engine turned over with a groan and then steadied. He headed north, past the edge of town, where the pavement narrowed to gravel and the landscape became more sky than anything else. Route 24 was quiet. The power lines buzzed with erratic pulses, and the church bell in the distance rang half a chime before stopping altogether. About a mile outside Wilmont, Eli saw it. The crumpled shape of an SUV off to the right, lying at an odd angle in the shallow ditch between the road and a tilled cornfield. The back wheels were spinning, throwing mud. He pulled over, slammed the truck into park, and stepped out. The smell hit him first. Gasoline and warm metal. He crossed the ditch quickly, boots sucking into the wet soil. "Hello?" he called, voice even, low. A small head popped up through a broken back window. Blonde hair, smudged face. The girl was maybe 9, maybe younger. Her eyes locked on his. "Please, my dad won't wake up. My aunt's arm is weird." Eli crouched beside the window. "What's your name?" "Lacey." "I'm Eli. I'm gonna get you all out of here. All right?" She nodded, lips trembling but jaw steady. He scanned the scene. The driver's side door was jammed. The passenger side hung open, frame twisted like a crushed soda can. The front seat was occupied by a man, mid-50s, unconscious, bleeding from a gash along the temple. His shirt was torn, but Eli could make out the stitching on the breast pocket. Duval, Nebraska Senate. Eli didn't pause. He fetched the jack and crowbar from the truck. Lacey crawled to the front seat, trying to hold her father's head steady. From the back, an older woman groaned softly, her face pale, one arm bent at an angle no arm should bend. "Stay with him," Eli told Lacey. Then he moved to the back door. Ruth Harper blinked up at him. "Can't feel my hand," she whispered. "You don't need to yet," he replied, and wedged the crowbar beneath the frame. With a grunt, he pried it open just enough to reach in, bracing her shoulder as he slid her out. She cried out, but didn't resist. With her arm cradled against her chest, he helped her onto the side of the road and wrapped his flannel shirt around her shoulders. "Help's coming," he said. "They always say that," she muttered, then slumped back against the grass. Eli turned to Mark. Blood trickled from his temple, soaking into the collar. Eli touched his neck, pulse, but weak. He braced himself, then heaved the man across his back, one arm slung under his legs, the other gripping around the waist. Every old injury screamed, but Eli didn't stop. He carried him to the truck bed and gently laid him down. Lacey followed, stepping through shards of glass with bare feet. As he reached to lift her, the sirens finally began to wail, long, steady notes echoing over the hills like the cry of something too late. He looked up. The clouds had gone green. He grabbed the tarp from behind the seat, threw it over the truck bed, and ushered Lacey beneath it with the others. Her fingers clutched his shirt as thunder cracked above them. Sweat ran down his spine. His knuckles bled where the crowbar had slipped. He turned and saw it. Over the cornfield, a funnel cloud began to spin, thick, dark, impossibly fast. It reached down like a finger from heaven, twisting, growing, charging toward the ditch like it knew exactly where to go. Memory hit him like a blow. 1991, trailer park, south of Tulsa. Screams in the dark. A propane tank burst. Fire. And one boy he hadn't gotten to in time. Not this time. Eli slammed the tailgate shut and yanked the tarp tight over the sides. He pressed his body against the metal, shielding the gap with his back. Inside the darkness, Lacey's voice came small and close. "Is it coming for us?" Tornadoes don't just rip up homes. They rip quietly open. Eli's Peterbilt roared as he swung it across the gravel road, angling the nose toward the storm and the rear toward the ditch. The funnel cloud was growing fast, darker than any sky had a right to be. It chewed its way across the horizon like a blade through tall grass, tossing fence posts and roofing in its wake. He yanked the brake, threw open the door, and climbed into the back, where the three bodies lay motionless under the tarp. Lacey peeked out from beneath, her fingers white-knuckled around the hem. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. "Stay down," Eli said. The wind punched the side of the truck. The passenger mirror snapped clean off and flew backward, vanishing into the field. Dust whipped through the air in tight, angry spirals. Gravel stung his cheeks as he pulled the tarp lower, then tugged off his denim jacket and draped it over Lacey. "Close your eyes," he told her. "Don't move unless I say." She nodded once, curled tight beside her father and Ruth, whose shallow breath whistled through broken ribs. Eli dropped low, pressing his back against the metal panel between the wheels. The space beneath the truck was just enough to lie flat, to cover what mattered. His boots sank into the soggy earth. The pressure in the air changed, popping in his ears like altitude shift on a plane. The sky screamed. A sheet of aluminum skidded across the road and slammed into the Peterbilt's side with a bang that echoed deep into his chest. The whole truck shuddered. Eli gritted his teeth, feeling every tendon pulled tight. He hooked one arm over Lacey's small body and the other across Ruth's legs. Mark lay slumped against the toolbox, unmoving but still warm. Then came the rain, not drops, but needles, sideways, piercing. The tarp flapped violently. Eli's shoulder burned where a rock tore through his shirt. He shut his eyes, dirt stinging the edges. A memory pushed through the noise. His mother in their old kitchen, humming a hymn under her breath while folding laundry. Something slow, comforting. something that held steady even when the world didn't. He began humming it now, low and off-key, barely audible over the chaos, but it steadied his breath. The wind picked up again, louder, closer. A metal road sign shot across the sky, glancing off the truck with a sharp clang. Something cracked nearby, a telephone pole maybe. Power lines sparked blue somewhere out of sight. Lacey was shaking. Her small body trembled beneath his jacket, but she didn't make a sound. He shifted slightly, curling tighter around her. His lips moved near her ear. "You're not alone." The storm howled louder, shrill and ragged. Then the sound deepened into a growl, the heart of the funnel passing just beyond the ditch, devouring trees and silos like they were nothing. The Peterbilt rocked on its axles, tires half lifted off the ground. Eli's spine pressed into the mud. A wheel well groaned above his head. Wind clawed at the tarp, trying to rip it away, but his body held it down. And then, a crack, a roar, a silence. It didn't end so much as it moved on, as if the storm had simply grown bored. The air settled in stages. The rain softened to a patter. The wind eased to a whisper. Dust floated instead of flying. Lacey sobbed softly against his chest. Ruth gasped, breath hitching. "We're still here." But Eli didn't move. He stayed exactly where he was, muscles locked, breath shallow. His eyes were open, staring at the underside of his truck's frame, caked with rust and survival. "You didn't leave us," Lacey whispered. By the time the sirens stopped, Eli Whitaker had already disappeared into the drizzle. The rain had thinned to a mist by the time emergency crews arrived, but the air still hung heavy, thick with ozone and the scent of torn earth. The funnel cloud had moved on, leaving behind a path of uprooted trees, broken fences, and silence more unsettling than noise. Paramedics swarmed the road like ants, moving quickly but gently as they lifted Ruth Harper onto a stretcher and laid Senator Mark Duval across another. His pulse was steady now, though his eyelids didn't flutter. Lacey clung to the edge of the ambulance doorway, her small frame wrapped in a wool blanket 3 sizes too big. Eli stood a few feet back, his jacket damp and muddy, arms crossed tightly against his chest. One paramedic approached him with a clipboard and a polite but urgent tone. "Sir, did you witness?" Eli raised a hand. "Just passing through." He turned before she could ask another question, boots sloshing through mud as he moved up the embankment toward his truck. Lacey spotted him and opened her mouth, but the medic drew her attention with a flashlight test and a soft, "Sweetheart, look here." Tommy Harper stood across the road, a pair of work gloves stuffed into his back pocket. His shirt was stained from earlier repairs at the mower shop, and his eyes followed the familiar shape of Eli's truck with something close to disbelief. He didn't wave. He just watched. Sheriff Carla Boone arrived a minute later in her cruiser, slowing as she passed the scene. Her eyes scanned the ditch, the medics, the townsfolk emerging from their homes with cautious steps. And then she saw him, across the road, climbing into the Peterbilt's cab. She didn't call out, didn't flash her lights, just watched as Eli pulled the door shut and eased the truck onto the road without haste or panic. By the time the cruiser turned around, he was already a taillight in the mist. Back in Wilmont, the power flickered on street by street. The old traffic camera mounted above the northern stoplight, one of 3 in the entire town, blinked back to life, its battery backup barely holding a signal. A grainy image snapped every few seconds and uploaded automatically to the county's public safety archive. One of those frames showed Eli bent low in the ditch, his arm around Ruth's shoulders as he lifted her from the wreck. Another caught the moment he brushed Lacey's hair back before turning away, his figure blurred at the edges like a ghost deciding to stay unseen. By dusk, a town IT technician named Marlin, 22, underpaid and still living above his parents' garage, downloaded the clip and posted it on the local Facebook group with a caption, "Whoever this is, thank you." It spread faster than he expected. That night, Eli returned to his garage. He parked the Peterbilt close to the side door and walked inside without flipping the main lights. He moved on instinct, navigating the cluttered workbench. The hanging socket wrenches, the row of old spark plugs kept more from habit than use. At the back, he turned the faucet of a deep metal sink. Rusty water ran out first, then cleared. He scrubbed his hands, dirt and blood spinning into the drain. His knuckles were raw, one nail cracked. He reached for the embroidered handkerchief tucked into the pocket of his flannel shirt, the one his mother had stitched with blue flowers, and wiped the engine oil from his wrists like a ritual. A photo sat on the shelf beside the old fuse box. A younger man in uniform, his father, standing at attention beside a worn American flag, arm draped around a boy with a buzz cut and shy grin. Eli lit a candle in front of it. He didn't say anything. The wind rattled the siding once, then quieted. Much later, long after the sun had disappeared behind thick clouds, a car rolled up and stopped just outside. Boone stepped out with a paper-wrapped loaf of sourdough from the diner and a folded note. She walked to the garage, paused at the door, and set both items gently on the step. She didn't knock. Inside, Eli sat on his stool, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, listening to the static hum of a half-tuned radio station. The note read, "I know it was you." See, no one in Wilmont had ever seen a story about their town on national news, until now. At 7:42 a.m., the regulars at the Wilmont diner were halfway through their eggs and toast when the little TV in the corner, usually reserved for sports scores and livestock prices, cut to a national anchor's face. Behind her, grainy footage played in slow motion. A man hauling bodies from a wrecked SUV, shielding a child with his own body beneath a looming funnel cloud. Marla paused mid-pour over a cup of black coffee. The room stilled. Identified only by his truck, a blue Peterbilt, this unnamed man vanished before first responders arrived, the anchor said. Locals have begun calling him the Storm Angel. If you know who he is, officials ask you to reach out. No one spoke. Then Dan, the insurance rep from Omaha, back again for flood claims, asked, "Isn't that your mechanic?" Marla blinked. "That looks like Eli." Tommy Harper, standing near the counter with a cinnamon roll half-eaten in his hand, nodded once. "It is." Marla set the coffee pot down. "Well, I'll be." At the hospital, Mark Duval stirred beneath crisp white sheets. The room smelled of bleach and something sweeter, apple juice maybe. His vision swam as he blinked, trying to piece together how he'd gotten there. Then he remembered the twisting sky, the sharp blow to the head, and the man, he croaked. A nurse turned. "Senator, the man who carried me, where is he?" She hesitated. "He didn't stay, but Sheriff Boone's on her way with a photo, I think." Boone arrived 10 minutes later holding a printout of a paused video frame. Eli, mid-step, Ruth Harper in his arms, face shadowed but unmistakable. Mark's fingers trembled as he touched the image. "Find him." Boone raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "In full authority as a United States Senator," he said, his voice low but steady. "I want to thank the man who saved my family, and I want the state to know his name." Back in Wilmont, Tommy stood outside the high school's automotive bay, speaking to a local reporter who had driven in from Lincoln. "He used to teach here," Tommy said. "Didn't talk much, but he fixed more than engines. I once busted a radiator messing around. Eli didn't tell the principal, just showed me how to do it right next time." Boone, meanwhile, confirmed the match with quiet efficiency. "It's him," she told the town council, holding up a side-by-side, the man in the video, and a decades-old group photo from a volunteer rescue team. The council members hesitated. "He's never attended a single event," one said, "not even a pancake breakfast." "He's always been different," another offered. "Maybe so," said Edna May, walking in with her cane tapping against the floor. "But he saved 3 lives, and that deserves more than quiet muttering." A local veteran stood up next. "I say we use Memorial Day. Make it about more than the past. Make it about who we are now." The motion passed almost unanimously. That evening, back at the garage, Eli sat at his workbench, the soft hum of the radio filling the silence. On the table in front of him lay his mother's ring, a thin band of gold with a blue speckled stone. Next to it, a worn photo. Himself in younger years, half smiling in a rescue uniform, shoulder to shoulder with a crew long scattered. The news crackled through the static. Local hero finally named as Eli Whitaker, a longtime resident of Wilmont, Nebraska. He didn't flinch, but his hand moved slowly to a new envelope resting atop a pile of receipts. The handwriting was careful, slanted. Inside, a single sheet of linen paper read, "You saved my family. I hope you'll let us thank you. M.D." Eli stared at the signature for a long time. Then he folded the letter and set it beside the photo, his hands shaking just slightly. A knock came at the garage door. 3 soft raps. He stood, wiped his palms on his jeans, and opened it. Tommy stood outside, chewing his lip. They're setting up a stage in the park. For you. On Memorial Day, Wilmont stood still, not for silence, but for gratitude. The park was fuller than anyone could remember. Rows of wooden chairs, mismatched and borrowed from churches and school auditoriums, lined the grass beneath the old elm trees. Flags waved gently in the morning breeze, some crisp and new, others faded by years on porches. The loudspeakers crackled with static before settling into the national anthem, its notes warbling but unmistakable. Eli stood behind the makeshift stage, adjusting the cuffs of a button-down shirt that hadn't seen daylight in a decade. His boots were polished, the old kind with worn heels and a stubborn crease across the top where his toes bent. The jeans were the only thing he refused to trade, familiar and real. In his pocket was a folded note, untouched since the day Boone left it at his door. He didn't plan to read from it, but it helped to know it was there. Lacey's words echoed in his head as he smoothed his collar. "You didn't leave." He hadn't, and maybe for once he was glad. The stage was simple. A few risers, a canvas backdrop painted with sunflowers, and the words, "Wilmont Remembers." A table beside it held a silver medal, its ribbon blue and white, and a plaque with his name etched into the wood. Eli stared at it like it belonged to someone else. Senator Mark Duval stood at the podium. His voice carried the weight of someone who had spent years behind microphones, but today it trembled. "I've delivered speeches across this country, but none like this," he began, "because today I'm not just a senator. I'm a man who got to hold his daughter again because a stranger said yes when the world said run." The crowd was quiet, not hushed out of politeness, but reverence, the kind born not from ceremony, but knowing. Mark continued. He didn't wear a uniform. He didn't wait for a siren. He stepped into the storm because someone cried out, and he listened. He looked toward Eli, then stepped aside. Sheriff Boone approached next, holding the medal. Her hand was steady, her voice low. For acts of civilian bravery beyond expectation, and for reminding this town what quiet courage looks like, Eli Whitaker, we thank you. Eli stepped forward. He didn't look at the cameras or the crowd, just the row of familiar faces. Tommy standing tall in a tucked-in shirt, Edna in her church best, Marla holding a handkerchief tight in both hands. He cleared his throat. "I'm not much for speeches," he said, voice quiet but carrying. "And I didn't do anything expecting this." He paused, eyes landing on Lacey in the front row, her hands folded over a frame wrapped in tissue paper. "But if I ever taught anyone anything, it's this. Listen when someone cries out." That was all. And it was enough. Lacey stood, walked up to the stage, and without a word handed him the painting. The tissue paper slipped away in the breeze, revealing a crayon drawing. A blue pickup truck, 3 small figures huddled beneath storm clouds, and across the top, in careful crooked letters, "My hero lives in a trailer." Eli looked at it for a long moment. Then he laughed, quiet, startled, the sound of someone remembering how. The whole park stood, not in applause, but in answer. That night the sun dipped low behind the garage, casting long shadows across the gravel lot. Eli sat in a folding chair outside, the painting resting on his lap. The radio played something old and soft, the kind his mother used to hum along with as she cooked. He leaned back, eyes on the stars starting to blink into view. "Guess it wasn't such a bad day after all, Ma," he mumbled, and stayed right where he was. Even in a town that rarely made the news, one man's quiet courage became something no one could ignore. Eli never asked to be seen, but when the storm came, he stood between it and others, simply because it was the right thing to do. Kindness doesn't always wear uniforms or speak loudly. Sometimes it just pulls over without being asked. Like a porch light left on in a long night, quiet goodness has a way of guiding us home. If this story stirred something in you, maybe it's time to look twice at the ones we so often overlook.